Physics at Manchester University, a well-known professor in neuroscience, shows on BBC television and radio. Dr. Brian Cox.
The first question I think to you, Chris, is that this is a film that is genuinely based on science. The plot relies on the science. And also I think to me, it's a film that's a celebration of science. So why did you want to make it?
Well, I came to the project relatively late, and I would say it's not so much a film that the plot relies on science as it's defined by science. Kim was involved as an executive producer from a very early stage, and he and my brother collaborated on the initial films of the screenplay. And I continued that collaboration when I took over the writing. And really the initial impulse was to look outwards, to look at what are the possibilities of the science out there in the greater universe. Because there's so much more exotic, so much more fascinating than the screenwriting can come up with, and more surprising as well. So we always try to, in every aspect of the film, look at what the real science offered first, and see if that would present an exciting opportunity for the audience.
There's also an element, I think, of polemic, particularly at the start. There are speeches in there about exploration, the value of exploration.
The technological progress that's been going on in the last couple of decades, a lot of it has been about what's in our pockets, what's in our living rooms, communication devices, this kind of thing. And Interstellar really tries to take the view of maybe it's time to start looking outwards again. Maybe it's time to start looking back at the ambitions of children when I was a child, which being an astronaut, getting out there into outer space was one of the highest aspirations. And it felt like that had gone away. It felt like some of that spirit had been lost. And so Interstellar certainly, I don't know if I would describe it as a polemic, but it certainly tries to suggest that there's great value in that, great value in science, and the science that leads us to explore the universe. That we'll never hit a moment where we say, what's here on Earth is enough for us. It's all we need to know. And so it definitely tries to look outwards in that.
I know Hans, we were talking backstage actually, and I said to you, what would you like to talk about? Music, of course, but you said to me, no, I also want to talk about the fact that the film is a celebration of scientists, not science.
Absolutely. I mean, I come from, my father was a scientist, and I think it's so amazing to be able to put scientists front and center, not the geeky sidekick, but that we really were making a movie and making scientists the heroes. And the way that, I don't know, there's a way Chris and I work together, which is that every time he tries to find a slightly different way of sort of tripping me up and interesting me in the process of the story. And this time, Chris came to, we ran into each other somewhere, and he said, if you were to write me one page without telling me what the movie was about, would I give him one day to write him a piece of music? And I received this beautiful letter, typewritten on a beautiful old typewriter. And really it was the story of a father and his child. And Chris knows, I mean, we have spent enough time together that my son's ambition, who is here tonight, is to be a scientist. So this story touched me deeply. And I wrote this small little piece for Chris, and I asked him to come down and have a listen to it. And he came over, and when I play something to somebody for the first time, I can't actually look at them because I'm too fragile. So I played it to him and sort of went in my typical way. So what do you think, Chris? I think he paused for a moment and said something like, well, I suppose I'm going to make the movie now. And I said, what is the movie? And that's when he started to talk about the idea of looking out. We looked inwards, now let's look upwards. And this idea of this vast canvas was presented to me. And at one point I think I interrupted and I said, well, I've written this tiny little fragile piece about, a father and his child. And he goes, but that's really the heart of the story. And Chris and I make this music together. It's like, the only way I can describe it is with this band. And you can disagree with me, you probably will. But there comes a certain point in our process, sort of halfway through making the movie, where we've virtually reversed roles, where you're talking more about music and the functions of the music, and I talk more about the story. And
I think that is very, very accurate. You know, it's one of the reasons why I think, for me, the collaborations are very much with Interstellar. The things we've done together, the music is inextricably linked. You can't pull it apart. It's not something that's layered on afterwards. It's something that's grown with the rest of the movie. Hans is one of the key collaborators, along with my director of photography and my actors and designer. You know, we do everything together. And I think when you look at a sequence like the Tesseract in the end, that represents a very intensive collaboration between a lot of different people, including Matthew McConaughey and our visual effects supervisor, our set designer, and Hans, and everyone coming together to try and express the inexpressible. Kit also very much involved with looking at those ideas of extra dimensionality and how time can be represented as a spatial dimension. You know, really trying to bring a lot of things to bear in one sequence.
Yeah, I think Kit, because you refer to the Tesseract, I know that that's you've got some slides, I think, that people were saying to me, you can't let him show slides. But Kit is one of the great physicists in the world, so he will show slides if he wants.
You don't expect to see things like this at Royal Albert Hall, do you? Well, I guess you're a special audience. So the Tesseract, those of you who have not seen the movie, we've promised we will try not to introduce any spoilers, but the Tesseract appears near the end of the film. The Tesseract is a cube in 4 space dimensions. So if you look on the left, that's what a cube looks like normally to you, but if you go up close to one face of the cube, and you're looking in, then you see the far face smaller than the front face. You see the other 4 faces around the sides. So now imagine carrying that to one higher dimension. If you have a cube in 4 dimensions instead of 3, it will look like a central cube, which is the far cube, and placed in a far square. And then 6 cubes around it, and then a cube that you're looking in through. So that's kind of weird. So you have a Tesseract of that sort, and you a very interesting thing about this Tesseract, now I've taken away one of the dimensions for just a moment, is that it can travel up in 4-dimensional space. The way Chris wrote the screenplay, you have 5 dimensions. You have 3 dimensions, north, south, east, west, up, down, of ordinary space. You have time, which is the 4th dimension, and the 5th dimension is what I would call out back. It's going out away from our 3-dimensional spatial universe up in one more spatial dimension. Physicists call this the bulk, but in the movie you'll hear it over and over again, the 5th dimension. You get up to the 5th dimension and this Tesseract can travel across the universe. The universe you see here is down below. The distance across the universe up there in the bulk is only about the same as the distance between the Earth and the Sun, but down in our brain, in our universe, it's 10 billion light years. It's amazing. So you can travel in the Tesseract up in the bulk all the way across the universe from the far reaches back to Earth. And the Tesseract can then dock alongside a bedroom. We won't say whose bedroom. Well, it's pretty much a spoiler there. Get rid of it. And so you see a guy floating, and this guy is looking through faces of the Tesseract, looks up and looks down on that girl's head, the other face of the Tesseract. If he looks down, the light ray is coming to him from her feet. If he looks to the left, the light ray is coming from her right side, and so forth. And so to him, this guy is floating in that face of the Tesseract. This is kind of mind-bending, but this is the way his mind worked. Isn't it?
Well, I've always been fascinated by those ideas in science that take you outside of things we can see and hear, the dimensions, the 3 dimensions, the 4 dimensions that we know, these ideas that there are higher dimensions that we can intuit. I love the idea that maybe we're seeing artifacts of those dimensions that we don't yet understand. So
here's the artifact.
Here's the artifact. Time being a higher dimension that we can experience, but we can't see it, feel it, taste it.
And so on the right, this is the way the guy floating sees it. He doesn't see this tesseract, the four space dimensions. He sees the girl, 6 iterations of the girl, 4 around, 1 above and 1 below. 6, but they are simultaneous iterations of the same girl, just seen from this higher dimension. So you're looking at, imagine this in a blockbuster movie that sold 100 million tickets worldwide, these kinds of concepts, that took guts.
You can travel back in time, you can go and prevent your grandparents from meeting, and so these paradoxes emerge.
Yeah.
But I found what you've done with that fascinating.
Well, you're right, anytime you deal with time as an accessible dimension of any sort, you get into the realm of paradox. But the more we thought about it and talked about it, the more I became fascinated by the idea of viewing time as a spatial dimension, or potentially as a spatial dimension, if it could be observed from a 5th dimension. If you could be a 5th dimension being looking at our world, as Anne Hathaway's character says at one point, the past might be a canyon you can climb down into, the future might be a mountain you can climb up. The interesting thing about that to me, as it relates to fate, destiny, free will, we were talking about earlier, you were asking about the attitude towards free will that the film has. Well, really, all that it's saying is, if you can view time as a spatial dimension from a higher dimension, your entire concept of free will is invalid. It becomes something else, something we can't know because we aren't able to access the 5th dimension. But you take away the idea of cause and effect, because cause and effect is defined temporally. And so when you remove that relation, or you view it from a higher dimension, whatever's going to replace that will answer your question about free will and destiny. The great thing is in making a movie, we don't have to have the answer, we just have to be able to intelligently pose the question and suggest that we might not be hidebound by our current thinking in terms of cause and effect. We have a means, by telling a story on film, of suggesting a way in which we might transcend conventional ideas of cause and effect.
Those ideas, if we're going to have a universe with extra spatial dimensions, which indeed we're looking for at the Large Hadron Collider, for example, so that's not necessarily science fiction, and if we're going to have a universe with wormholes, which we'll talk about in a moment, do we have to modify our view of what free will is and the way humans behave? Do you have to replace that with some kind of consistency criteria?
So I struggled with this some years ago, actually triggered by Carl Sagan's movie Contact, which led me to start thinking about time travel. And as a theoretical physicist, I may as well hand my hat and abandon the enterprise if it's possible for me to go backward in time and kill my grandfather before my mother's conceived. And so if I go backward in time, physics makes no sense, the laws of the universe make no sense unless everything is self-consistent, which means no free will in some sense. And so I basically decided that's the way it's got to be, or else there are no physical laws and nothing works.
So you decided that you have no free will?
We were having a conversation between Chris and me. He draws me out quickly, and I'll shut up.
Did you get involved in these? This sounds like a great
in a strange way, because these questions were posed to me constantly, and of course I work in a medium which is far more abstract, and at one point I did sit down and try to consolidate the differences between the relativity theory, gravity, time, and quantum mechanics, and there's a piece of music that goes through the movie. One of these days I'm actually going to sit down and explain really how it works with you. Because there's an element which is gravity, which actually, this could be too long a conversation. But ultimately, what it became is, it became a love theme, and which is something that Chris suggested in the movie anyway. And it is this, when seemed to be sort of my way of, consolidating these different theories.
Relativity, the effects of relativity, so time dilation, really is a powerful emotional driver in the film. I don't want to give too much away, but it's
well, it comes back to what we were talking about earlier about higher dimensions of time, and the film takes the view, and Kip and I talked about this at an early stage, so we're considering time to be the fourth dimension. We're considering time to be a higher dimension, fourth dimension, of which our human experience of time is incomplete. We're feeling something that we can't fully grasp, we can't see from higher perspective. And yet it's the truth of it, the reality of it is undeniable. We feel it in all of our experience, our relationships, having children, growing, aging, ultimately dying. And so it's undeniable, but it's very, very mysterious. And as soon as you start viewing time in that way, time becomes, I mean, in the film they refer to it as, they need to look at it as a resource, like oxygen, food, water, whatever. And that's not entirely dissimilar to what we were doing at conceptual stage, and saying time is going to be a character in this film. A lot of my films address time from a narrative point of view, from a storytelling point of view. But this is the first time I've ever really got to address it as a concrete character, really, a strong feature of the narrative that's just inextricably linked with it, really. I mean, I had an interesting conversation with Richard Linklater recently, who's wonderful from Boyhood. When I saw it, I felt all kinds of strange similarities to what we were doing in Interstellar, even though the films could not be more different. And he'd actually noticed the same thing when he saw Interstellar, which I thought was really, really fun, because it really is a question of, how do you try and grapple with this experience that we all live through, that we're all imprisoned by, of time. And so all of the aspects of the science that Kip could suggest to me, present me with, in terms of how you would have a real world situation, real life situation, in which time is running differently for people at different rates. And of course, one of the things that I like to point out to people, because Kip pointed out to me and it absolutely blew my mind, is that idea of relativity, the idea of time running at different rates, is one of the key components of the GPS on your phone working. And so those GPS satellites, the differential, the clocking differential has to be in place or they wouldn't work. So we use every day something that actually uses this idea that seems impossible to us, that time will run differently under different conditions and in different places.
I know, Kip, you had a great challenge as the advisor on the film, because the planet that orbits the black hole Gargantua, you have 7 years to the hour. And I know you said to me that you thought that might be impossible.
Yeah, well, it was a conversation between Chris and me. I think maybe the second time we met, could have even been the first time we met other than socially, where you told me you wanted to have people on this planet that was near a black hole have 1 hour elapse, while 7 years are elapsing back on Earth or up very high above the black hole. I said to you, I don't think that would work. And he said, Chris said, go home and think about it, sleep on it. And he knew to tell me that, because we did the rounds on other things, and I've been the rounds with his brother, Jonah, on other issues, where they, as creative filmmakers, would have an idea, and I would say probably it won't work, and they would challenge me to go find a way to make it work, and almost always I did. In this case, I went home and slept on it, then I did a calculation, I found I was completely wrong. All my intuition was based on a non-spinning black hole, but if you have a black hole that spins very, very fast, then it creates a whirling tornado of space around itself, which helps hold the planet out, so it can be much closer to the surface of the black hole than it would otherwise be, because it's being held out, flung out by whirling space, attracted by gravity. And it can be close enough that 1 hour is 7 years back on Earth. It was amazing to me.